when this all started. I'd been in a job for a long time. At that point, it was probably coming up 8 years. And for most of that, I hadn't been real happy there. When I first got into the job, it was just, something that's probably familiar to most people. Got out of college, couldn't find a job in the field that they were looking for, needed to start paying back those student loans, and, so eventually I found myself where I was at. I told myself, 1 year, I'll be there a year, and then, go do something, in my field, something that I'll enjoy more. And, it was 8 years then, now it's almost 9 years. So, I've spent a better part of the last decade, in this job. And, all that time, I told myself, I got to figure out what I want to do. I just kept putting it off and putting it off because, even though I wasn't particularly happy, I had security. It was scary to think about doing something different. But one day I found myself just sitting in church and listening to the sermon, and it was just, about, trusting, God to provide, and that if you're following his path, he'll take care of you. And for whatever reason, I've heard that a million times, growing up in a Christian home, but, that day it really resonated. And so I, started thinking about every career path that I'd ever considered, and it was a long list because over the years I thought about doing a lot of different things. I have a wide variety of interests and passions and talents, and I just, didn't know what the right fit would be. Suddenly, just in the middle of the sermon, it's almost like I was just transported somewhere else. I just had this clear vision in my head of me standing in front of a classroom teaching. And when I thought about that, I just had this immense peace come over me, and I knew right then and there that was, where God was, sending me, what he was wanting me to do. And so that was really exciting, finally figuring out where I was headed. And now, it was figuring out, okay, how do I get there? On the way home from church that day, I told my wife what happened, and, she was really excited. She felt, yeah, that, I can see you doing that, and it sounds like that is directly from God, and so let's figure this out. After several days of just praying and thinking, going over all the options, I weighed every possible scenario, and I only could think of one that was really feasible, and I felt like it was what God was saying. This is the path to go. This is how you're going to do it. How I'm going to keep you from racking up debt. And so I told my wife, I go, okay, here's what I think we need to do. We need to sell the house, use the profits to pay for school, and we have to move back in with one of our parents. So she, spent time thinking about it and praying about it, and, she came back and said, you're right, I think this is what God's telling us to do. And, just everything came together. Within weeks, the home's sold, I'm in school, we're ready to go, and it's been a wild ride, but, every step of the way, when something crazy's happened, God's provided. So, I'm reading through Exodus, and just the Exodus story, this whole story of the Israelites, and, everything that God did for them, and how, they were up against extraordinary odds, but God provided every step of the way. That, really resonated, especially with my whole situation, and just this idea of God providing. And, even when, the Israelites, screwed up or weren't sure, they didn't necessarily believe that they were going to be able to get out of a situation. Like when, they were sitting at the Red Sea, and all of a sudden, here come the Egyptians. They panicked. God had just delivered them. They just seen what he could do with all the plagues, and yet they doubted and were worried. And then once again, he just showed them, don't worry, I've got this. And the biggest takeaway from all this is that, when you really trust in God, and even when it's scary, even when there's so much unknown, you don't know, what's going to happen or how you're going to provide or, cover this and that. If you just, rely on him, if you're doing what he tells you to do, then it's all going to work out.